Fate Samurai Remnant is releasing globally tomorrow, and today I'm gonna briefly give you the ins and outs of the game without touching any big spoilers so that you can decide if you want to get the game for yourself or not. I've now played about 6 hours and most of the stuff I'll cover in this video will be from the prologue of the game as a heads up. I'm not getting paid to make this video, but I do want to give a big thanks to Koei Tecmo America for giving me early access to the full game to make this video for you guys. First, let's talk about the setting of the game. Samurai Remnant takes place in Edo, Japan in the mid-1600s, where the waxing moon ritual is about to begin. For all you pre-existing Fate fans out there, this is basically a Holy Grail war under a different name. 7 people are chosen as masters and they will all be accompanied by a servant, a heroic spirit of the past. Samurai Remnant also adds a bit of extra spice on top, as there will be also 8 rogue servants summoned who aren't directly under the command of any masters that act on their own free will. The 7 masters will fight each other until one remains and the victor will claim the waxing moon for themselves, which can grant any wish to the holder. In this game, you play as Miyamoto Iori, the adopted son and disciple of the legendary Miyamoto Musashi. In the current day, Musashi has passed away and Iori is left to find his place in the world as a Ronin until one day he is chosen as a master to participate in the waxing moon ritual. One night, he gets assaulted by the rider-class servant and ends up summoning Saber and fully locking himself as a participant of the ritual. This is basically where the story begins properly. Now let's move on to the gameplay side. You control and fight as Iori mostly, who is a fairly capable fighter himself too. You can move freely around all the areas that you unlock and find various activities to complete, most of which are optional, but I would highly recommend doing them to aid your progress. Let's start by talking about the combat, which is the main meat of the game. The game mostly handles like a Musou style game where you can fight enemies in packs of anywhere between 1 to dozens. You have 2 main attack buttons, a normal and a heavy attack. Normal attacks string for longer combos and heavy attacks don't combo, but rather act as a finisher, and depending on when you decide to cut your normal attack string with a heavy attack, the finisher also varies a lot. You can find detailed information on all the heavy attack finishers and what they do on the menu, which also includes animations for the attacks, which is, pretty cool. Heavy attacks will also interrupt some enemy wind-up attacks, and successfully landing one in time will also stun them for a bit. Iori also has stances that he can swap between in combat that change his playstyle a lot. For the 2 you start out with, the water stance has Iori wielding 2 swords, the Nita and Ichiro style. Musashi fans will recognize this style for sure, and this stance is mostly suited for fast hits and AoE damage. The other starting stance, Earth, is much more slower meanwhile and is more fortified and more suitable for dealing with singular, tougher opponents. Iori also has a gauge you can fill in battle, and once full, he can use his special technique for great AoE damage. In addition to being a swordsman, Iori also has some training in magecraft and can use consumable gems to cast spells on enemies that include stuff like fireballs, fire cones, and even being able to heal himself. There's some more stuff too, but that's basically how Iori behaves in combat. Now, while you do control Iori mostly, most of the time you will also be accompanied by Saber, who by default is controlled by AI and fights alongside you in battles. Sometimes you can get separated too, but most fights will have you both fighting together. Saber has her own techniques that you unlock as the story progresses, and you can equip 4 of them at a time. Servant techniques consume 1 to 3 technique points. Some of them are also labeled as collab techniques that can still be cast normally, but periodically, and depending on your bond with Saber, she will call out to you in battle to combine an attack with her for one of these, and it doesn't cost technique points this way. And the most important bit of Saber's combat is her gauge. Once this fills up, you can directly take control of her for a short period of time. Trust me when I say this, that this is when you can do most of your big damage in combat. Some tougher enemies will also have a shell gauge that makes them very tanky, and normal attacks hardly do any damage against it. Saber's attacks, however, can do really significant damage to this, and I usually end up saving the takeover for these. Iori's spells can also help with these. And Hydro Pump for the win. So that's the basics of combat, and it can be a little overwhelming at first, but I got used to the feel pretty fast. Let's talk briefly the technical side. I'm playing this on PC, and even with my fairly aged machine, I could get a smooth experience most of the time. Only in really crowded city areas is where I notice some frame dips, but combat has always felt good. And for those wondering, yes, you can go above 60 FPS all the way to 120 FPS if you change from graphics mode to performance mode. Otherwise, we have a pretty good selection of settings to optimize the game with for those wanting to do that as well. I'm playing the game with a controller, and I would highly recommend using it to others as well. It was definitely designed with a controller configuration in mind. And finally, outside of combat, all areas in the game have sub-objectives for you to clear for some nice bonus gains, including visiting food stalls, visiting shrines, fighting random groups of enemies, and best of all, petting cats and dogs. These sub-objectives can easily be tracked by the bulletin boards on each of the areas for you completionists out there, although some of them cannot be fully cleared with just one visit to the towns. Stuff like enemies will respawn when moving between towns, by the way, in case you run out of those. And speaking of locations, there seems to be around 23 places you can visit around Edo total, if my quick scouring math of the map was correct, which is pretty good. Your home base and mage workshop is located in Asakusa, and you can do various stuff there too, like resting, which is a free way to heal yourself, refining your swords for temporary boosts, review all the story and CGs so far, costumes, upgrading the workshop, and more stuff will open as the story progresses. You even have access to a leyline mode on the map, which reminds me of the Grell fronts a little bit from FGO. I'm not gonna cover it in detail in this video, but it's a cool little addition as well. As for side quests, they mostly exist in the form of digressions that are focused on the rogue servants, although don't be dumb like me and do some of them way too early or you might end up having a bad time. For the RPG side, both you and Saber will level up from doing various activities, and for equipment, you have your sword mountings. They will increase your stats too and can add unique effects like restoring HP on kills. As a bonus note, they physically change the appearance of your swords, which I think is pretty cool. And you also have access to a skill tree for both Iori and Saber. You spend skill points to unlock more stuff. The stuff includes anything from new spells, passive stats, to new combos and utilities. Skill points can also be gained from consuming skill jewels, which can be found around the maps. So far, my favorite thing has been unlocking Riposte for Iori, which makes it so that if you time your dodge at the perfect time just before damage, the game lets you riposte for massive damage, which really adds to the skill level of the game. I'm still not great with the timings, and I get myself beat a lot, but sometimes when you land several ripostes, it just feels amazing. The water stance tree also allows you to slow time a little on heavy attack finisher, which makes combat feel even more cinematic and badass. I should also note that a lot of Saber's skill tree is locked behind Bond, which improves over time, mostly from the main story. I could say and cover so much more stuff from my brief time with the game already, but I'm gonna wrap it up here. I'm not sure how easy it will be to recommend this game for everyone, but I would say for at least the Fate franchise fans, it's worth checking out. And in case someone was curious, while there are cute references and callbacks to other Fate stuff in the game, I don't think you really need much prior knowledge, if any, to play this game as a newcomer into the series in case you want to check it out. There are some bits and pieces that don't feel amazing to me, but when you get into the groove of the gameplay, it can feel really satisfying and fun to play. And of course, a lot of people will play solely for the story, and that's completely understandable. If you have any further questions regarding anything at all to do with the game, do leave a comment below and I'll try my best to answer you. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you press the like button. Also consider subscribing. I'm not sure how much I'm gonna post about the game, but I do have a lot of fun videos on the way as usual, so stay tuned for those. Hope you enjoy the game if you plan on getting it, and otherwise, hope to see you in the next video. Peace out.